Support for this episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere is made possible by the Wessex Press, the premier publisher of books about Sherlock Holmes and his world. Find them online at wessexpress.com.
I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, episode 157, Sherlock Holmes Cyclopædia.
I hear of Sherlock everywhere since you became a chronicler.
In a world where it's always 1895, comes I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, a podcast for devotees of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the world's first unofficial consulting detective.
I've heard of you before. You're Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office.
The game's afoot as we discuss goings-on in the world of Sherlock Holmes enthusiasts, the Baker Street irregulars, and popular culture related to the great detective.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
So join your hosts, Scott Monty and Burt Wolder, as they talk about what's new in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
You couldn't have come at a better time!
And welcome once again to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast for Sherlock Holmes devotees where it's always 1895. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Burt Wolder.
And, you know, it is absolutely a delight as we close down November and enter December to share this time with you once again. You know, we do this thing here for the sake of really you, our listeners. We want to bring you the most interesting people that have the most interesting things to say about what's going on in the world of Sherlock Holmes. And in that vein, we are planning for 2019. So, if you know of people that are doing worthy and interesting things that kind of stand out, that you think the rest of the world of Sherlock Holmes enthusiasts needs to know about, please let us know. Be in touch in a variety of ways. You can certainly comment on our website at ihearofsherlock.com. The show notes for this episode are available at ihose.co/ihose157. You can comment directly on that page. You can send us an email, comment at ihearofsherlock.com. That is certainly a preferable way to recommend interviewees to us. And of course, we're on all of the social networks as well as I Hear of Sherlock. And if those don't work for you, well, there's always the phone. And we can still be reached on our hotline at 774-221-READ. That's 774-221-7323.
Yes, and we are eager for your feedback because one of the things we've never really talked about explicitly in these podcasts is that on a practical basis, neither Scott nor I really care very much about Sherlock Holmes. So your ideas and suggestions are going to be really important.
That is a great point. And, you know, if this isn't for you, you know, if you don't want to listen to individuals talk fresh air style about their Sherlockian experience, well, we've got this other show that we do every week called Trifles, where we look at some of the details in the Sherlock Holmes stories. You can find that on any of the major podcast networks, and the show notes are available at sherlockholmespodcast.com. We are doing the same exercise over there. If you think there are things that we should cover, please write in and tell us. Same email address, same contact information. We would be delighted to hear from you. Well, we're delighted to hear from this fellow here. Bert, why don't you tell us all about our guest?
We are very pleased to welcome someone with a very unique title, and you could find this title inside his book, which we're going to be talking about shortly. He has the title, he says here, of Sherlock Holmes Media Pundit, and that is Howard Ostrom. Howard, his first introduction to mystery fiction was his older sister's Nancy Drew mysteries, and his local librarian pointed him to Sherlock Holmes or the Hardy Boys, and he never much cared for the Hardy Boys, poor old Frank and Joe. But Sherlock Holmes' adventures made a big impact on Howard. When he was 9 years old, There was a major event in his house. His parents got their first TV, and that kicked off his lifelong fascination with and appreciation of Sherlock Holmes on screen. He is a graduate of James Wilson Young High School in Bayport, Long Island. He has a BA in English Literature from the University at Albany, from SUNY University in Albany. He is the general manager of Ocala Breeders Sales, which we'll talk to him more about because he's very involved in breeding and racehorse work in Ocala, Florida. And he's also the manager of a comedy club. And he is the only person we will ever welcome to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere with the title of Sherlock Holmes Media Pundit. Welcome, Howard Ostrom.
Well, thank you. I'm very honored to be on your show. I've enjoyed it for years.
Well, we knew there was somebody.
You and three other people. That's great.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned...
Not supposed me a pen, by the way. I'll have you know. I answered one of your questions, and he was going to send me a pen. He never did.
Uh-oh.
Oh, well, we can fix that.
Yeah. I think I may have one or two left.
We can fix that. Now, Howard, I mentioned in introducing you in that little sketchy biography that your first connection to Sherlock Holmes was when you were in school. But can you tell us a little bit more about that time you first met Sherlock Holmes?
Well, here's something I learned by writing the book and all the I write a lot of niche essays and stuff. It's just a way of me keeping my notes is to write these essays on all sorts of subjects. Holmes, comedian Holmes, animal Holmes, female Holmes, Afro-American Holmes, Russian Holmes, Polish Holmes. I've got a whole selection of essays, but that's just the way I kept my notes. And a kid over in England named, you know him, Fode, Ross K. Fode. He had a website called No Place Like Holmes, and I had seen a YouTube of him doing reviews of books, and he was a young guy and a good comedic mind, and he had a lot of fun on it, and I put some comments on his YouTube. These are fun, make more, kind of this stuff. And he contacted me, and we got talking, and he wanted to put my collection of autographs on his website because he'd seen some of them, and he wanted a place to the public to see it. So we became involved, and he started putting all my essays on there, and then he started making films of my essays. And so we had these Diogenes documentaries on YouTube. And the early part you're talking about was I, like everybody else, started with books and literature. And I had to move around a bit with some tracks, racetrack work. And I ended up next to Don Hobbs out in Dallas, Texas, Flower Mound, Texas. And he had his maniac collector that he is. I got to visit his library and stuff, and I had a collection of pastiches. And the Hounds of the Internet were coming around at that same time. So I'd get on the Hounds of the Internet, and I would try and talk media. And there was one fellow from, I think it was Robert Morris University up near Pittsburgh. He would talk media with me, but everybody else would attack me for, like, this is literature. You probably know the Rodens, but they pretty much ran me off there every time I tried to talk about media. They insulted me and stuff. So I switched over to Welcome Holmes when it started, and they were more open. I could, throw out everything I wanted there, but sometimes they said I talked too much. So,
well, what was your path? I'm not quite clear about your path here. So when you first read the Holmes stories as a very young person, did that stay with you? I mean, were you a big consumer of other mystery fiction?
Yeah, no, not really mystery fiction. I was more into Lord of the Rings, Robert Louis Stevenson, Charles Dickens. Those were my favorite authors during that period of time. But once I saw Basil Rathbone on TV, I would have swore that's what started me on media stuff, was Basil Rathbone. But writing this book, I'm suddenly getting all these things that were on TV when I was young, late 50s, early 60s, through the 70s. I'm finding hundreds of Sherlock Holmes that I didn't observe. I watched these shows. How come I didn't see these Sherlock Holmes, So that was part of a reason for putting note. Every time I'd see one, I'd put it on a note and throw it to the side. And eventually computers came out, and I was able to put them in a file on a computer, That's why I had all these notes for all these years. Don Hobbs, well, I was going to tell you, when I was in Texas with Don Hobbs and had to move back to Florida, I didn't want to move this giant book collection. And he had autographs of Jeremy Brett when he visited Dallas. And I had a few autographs of Rathbone and a couple others that I got in years earlier. So I decided to convert my collection and trade him all the books, because I had some rare books that he wanted, and get his autograph. And I had to stay in Texas for 3 months to sell a new house I had built, but I was going through a divorce. And I stayed there to sell a house. So to stay out of trouble, I wrote every single actor who played Holmes or Watson on stage, in film. I would go through the internet and find addresses, find theaters they were at, find their agents. And I'd try to go through all those. And I developed a huge collection from that. And that was media, which set me in a direction of all of a sudden, I find some of my autographs are wrong because I'm going with the reference books all out. Pointer, everyone that was out. I had every reference book on Holmes in screen, Holmes in media. And I thought it would be a finite collection. I had all these reference books. Like, oh, there's a few hundred guys. I can do this all. This would be cool. Let's get them all. And then just sell them off when my daughters are old enough to go to college. Just build it up and then sell it off. And all of a sudden, I find out a lot of these guys did not play Holmes, or there's bad information. And what started all that was actually Les Klinger article in the Baker Street Journal. He wrote an article. It was a humorous article. And he was saying that the first Sherlock Holmes was not Maurice Costello, who's listed in all the reference books, and that he had spoke to Michael Pointer, and Michael Pointer told him it had gone to publish when he learned that his source was bad on that, and he didn't think it was him. But since the book was already published, he couldn't do anything about it. And all of a sudden, every book from then on had Maurice Costello. And I had gone on eBay, bought a Maurice Costello autograph, had it framed up on my wall, whatever. I'm proud. I got the first Sherlock Holmes. And now I'm reading this article and I'm saying he might not be it. And I'm like, oh. So I take this knowledge, and now you can search the internet because all these newspapers are being put on and all these old movie magazines by different funds and universities and things. And I had the ability they didn't have. I'm not blaming Pointer and the previous guys. They didn't have this. They had to go to the Library of Congress and try and look stuff up. I could search. So I started out with this search to find out who the first Sherlock Holmes really was. Klinger had wrote the article, but he just made it a humorous article where he says, since it wasn't Maurice Costello, Sherlock Holmes was on hiatus during this period of time, so he came over here and made the film himself, and that was the humor of his story. But I said, I got to figure this out, Vitagraph Company. And that's got my first research paper was who was the first Sherlock Holmes of film. And I had to go through millions of articles on silent films. And meanwhile, I'm copying all the notes on the silent films. So I end up writing the history of Sherlock Holmes and silent films with hundreds of new finds that nobody has in any of the reference books.
Well,
I just put it over.
Howard, my curiosity is getting the better of me. Who was the first Sherlock Holmes if it wasn't Maurice Costello?
It was Gilbert Anderson. And the way I proved it was Les sent me, when we got to talking on the internet, he sent me the photos he had been given. He had some photos, and he could never identify them, he said. And I had the complete history of Vitagraph, who was in the company, who was directing, what year they got there. And that's how I could tell you that Maurice Costello, in the month and time the film was made, was actually in theater in West Virginia. And his wife also had their first kid, and he was at the hospital when it was. He wasn't making a film. And he didn't join that company until 2 years after that film was made. But Gilbert Anderson, who started S&A Films, who made the Gillette film, as a matter of fact,
right.
He was starting out. He had started out with Edison. He had jumped over to Vitagraph. He had made one film prior to this as a director, and he used somebody else in that film. But from then on, every film he directed, he started. And the reason, there's no credits on the film, but I've since discovered articles with ads for the film with more pictures, and I can identify him now. And he basically, from there, he was with them for a year. Then he jumped over and started his own company because he wanted to be a cowboy. He wanted to be a cowboy hero. So who did he become? Bronco Billy, the first cowboy of films. And he made hundreds of Bronco Billy films and started his own film company. But he was the first Sherlock Holmes of film, 1905, other than, the 1900, that 30-second mutoscope.
That Sherlock Holmes Baffled. Yeah, that actor is lost to the ages, unfortunately.
Yeah, I've tried a lot of investigation to find that. And I have a theory perhaps who it might be, but I haven't been able to prove that yet, so I have no paper on that yet. But I'm working on it. That's a tough one.
So going back to this notion of the Diogenes documentaries that you mentioned before, because you've obviously had this long-term interest in film and television, and you decide to take one of your papers and bring it to life with Ross Fode. What was that very first episode about?
It was the history of Sherlock Holmes in Russia. And it was mainly because I had more information on Russia than anybody around, because a fellow named Alexander Orlov, who's a heck of a researcher over in Moscow. Alexander Orlov was a friend of mine on Hounds of the Baskerville way in the beginning. And I wanted the autographs of the Levanov and Solimene, and he knew them. So he got me their autographs, and he traded me. He wanted Brett VHS tapes in those days. So I would get him all the Brett tapes and trade him for the Russian autographs. So the first one we did, I had all this information on Russia, and nobody knew about the history of Russia. And also I had a girlfriend in Russia, so I wanted to impress her. So I made a
mail order.
That was no, not mail order. This was a real one. I actually been there. So as a matter of fact, you might notice my picture if it's on your screen. I'm sitting at the Moscow, the statues, Sherlock statues, right outside the British Embassy.
Yeah, that's great.
Moscow. Yeah,
that's great.
He just took all my niche papers, and he loves. Russ is really a genius. He's a bit autistic, and he's a bit shy, but he can write comedy, and he can film. He's got this little room. He puts up a green screen. His dad was on a soap opera in England, and his godfather was Jeremy Bulloch, who was Boba Fett in the Star Wars.
Huh.
And still makes his living signing autographs as Boba Fett. But so he had a little knowledge of filming and stuff, but he just used it. I went over there and visited him, and he uses this little room with a green. You wouldn't believe it. It's like in a closet. When you look at he did his own Sherlock Holmes series, a comedy one where they're thrown into the future, and it's been on No Place Like Holmes for years. He's made a number of episodes. It's a good, entertaining show. So he just loved my stuff. So he constantly wants more, and then he picks out the stuff he likes, and he tries to, make it into a documentary, and they're very entertaining. I love them. I love that guy.
It's great. It's great. So you're billed as a Sherlock Holmes media pundit, and I think before the show we were chatting, that you were a completist of Sherlock Holmes in the media, which that kind of like that makes you like the John Bennett Shaw of Sherlockian media.
I'm a fanatic.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be a tireless and endless pursuit.
I don't sleep much at all, because I have so many connections now through all my papers. I did one paper just to get connections around the world on who is the first Sherlock Holmes by country. And I'm up to 67, 68 countries now. But I throw stuff. I knew it couldn't be the oldest one, but it was the only one I could find. And then each of these clubs generally has somebody who reaches out to me. So I've made friends in every part of the world, and they send me anything new or anything they find. and I got quite a pipeline for information. I have a group of 6 or 7 people that we daily send our finds, and you probably know a lot of them. Jeannie Patton, from California.
Sure.
She's a BSI member. Yeah, she is a YouTube specialist. YouTube and the other one. She sends me a list of everything new put on there every day. Now I got to go through this list, and any clip that's an old TV show or something and can't be identified, I try and contact. I send constant messages to whoever put the film on there, to the producers of the show, the director, to get the year and the Holmes thing, and a lot of them are in foreign languages. So I got to use Google Translator, and I try and get the script that you'll see in future books, that a lot of YouTube stuff, like the Russian ones, I translate some of the humor in it and put the whole comments in. It's pretty funny. Jeannie Patton sends me all that. A guy named Adrian Nebbit over in Malaysia, he's a specialist on British humor shows, 60s, 70s, and all your comedians. It's hard to name a comedian that hasn't done a parody of Sherlock Holmes. I mean, I can name one off the top of my head, and that's it, who haven't done it. I can tell you all the rest when they did it. But Peter Sellers, for some reason, I've never caught Peter Sellers on any clip. He's Inspector Clouseau. I've never gotten him. You'd think he'd be perfect for something to do with Holmes or some joke, but he hasn't. But you name any other comedian, I'll tell you when he did it, and they all did it. I mean, all the way back to W.C. Fields, right on through Laurel and Hardy, Evan Costello, the Three Stooges, Rodney Dangerfield, anybody. They have a clip on their show somewhere or another. And he's a specialist on the English ones. He really helps me out finding clips of those. Roger Johnson in England helps me out a lot. Peter Blau's in our little circle, and he sends me theater stuff all the time. Peter Blau, whatever's new coming out in the theater, which I'd like to crown this Kenneth Ludwig?
Yeah.
He's making these plays. There's 6 or 7 or 8 opening every weekend. It keeps me so busy. That guy, I'd like to crown him. But he's in on it. Alexis Barkeen is my French guy, and he had a lot to do with getting this book done, because Alexis Barkeen, he contacted our little group that we send around all the time, and he said, this guy may not talk in this conversation or be sending stuff like we send back and forth. He goes, but his name is Thierry Saint-Joanis, and can you put him in our little group so that he gets everything we send around? He'd like to see all this stuff. And what happened was, a year or two after reading all the stuff I'd send every day, he called me and he said, look, my lifetime dream is to put everything in an encyclopedia, everything about Holmes. I'm a completist. He's nuts too, just like me. It was a perfect partnership. So I'm an honorary Frenchman now. Actually, I have relatives who are French, so I fit in there.
Yeah, well, Howard, let me jump in here and ask you, this is a good segue into this book. So the book is Sherlock Holmes Cyclopædia Volume 1, and it is Sherlock Holmes on screens for 10 years, from 1929 to 1939. And it is, as you say, edited and illustrated by Thierry Saint-Joanis, who is, if our listeners don't remember, the founding president of the Société Sherlock Holmes de France. So step us through sort of 3 things here. I mean, why begin at the sound era rather than the silent era? And how did it come to be produced by Thierry Saint-Joanis? And what's the future of this series look like to you?
Okay. Well, the future's going to be long and far. I mean, we're going to make the Walls books look like, Reader's Digest when we get done with this. But, sorry, Ron, if you're still around. But, what happened there? I would have liked to start with silent films, naturally, because many of my discoveries are silent films. So I developed an interest in that because I had to do so much research for my autographs. And I wrote what I sent him in writing was, he had contacted me and said, you are the person I want to write this. And Les Klinger earlier had read my Sherlock Holmes silent film stuff, and he had sent a note to Stephen Doyle saying this needs to be put in a book. And I said, well, thanks, Les. I'm glad you're impressed by it, but I sort of just put my stuff on the internet because I'm always changing it so much, and I don't want people critical of me for their errors and stuff. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, too, and a completist. So I said, when I have it on, I never wrote it in a book because when I have the articles on the internet on Ross's site, I can just go in and make corrections and make changes and add stuff and take stuff out and do what I got to do. I said, once it's in a book, you better have your stuff ready. So when he called me and said this was his lifetime dream, his heart was in it, I was like, well, this is the guy, if I'm going to do it, I'm getting old, I better do it right now. Because a lot of people have asked me over the years, you got all this information, what are you going to just die and take it with you, or what? They said, put it in a book, put it in a book, put it in a book. And I just always said, I don't want to until I feel ready. And right when he said that, I felt ready because I felt I had a publisher whose heart and love for the subject was the same as mine after speaking to him. So and he wants to continue this on. I mean, he wants to do every aspect of Holmes, the Cyclopedia complete. He wants me to go through the stage and all that with him. And then he's got other people for comics, he's got specialists in all those areas that he's contacted. He wants to do a major stuff.
So let me ask you a question here and stop you for a second about that. So the purpose of the Cyclopedia is really to gather information about Holmes and media, stage, screen, and other things. Is that the focus?
Yeah, there's two things I wanted to focus on and a thing he wanted to focus on. I wanted to have a guide out there because so much is all this new technology, the YouTube and the Cinemax and the Netflix and everything can be viewed now pretty much, but nobody knows what the stuff is or where to find it. So I wanted to have not a TV guide per se, but a Holmes guide that has every date, every film, every Holmes, everything on TV, everything on the internet by title, date, and anybody could look this stuff up if they want to see it. I mean, I have cartoons, I have anime, there's a million things. So there's 1,000 items, but you wouldn't know that from volume 1. Because here's what happened with Volume 1. I'm probably the number one specialist on silent films because I did more research on that a lot of years. And he didn't think it was smart. He's the publisher, and he wanted to start with the talkie era. He didn't think silent films would sell as much, and he thought there'd be more interest from then on, and that we could always put silent films in later. Because if you don't sell Volume 1 and you don't sell Volume 2, there's no Volume 3 kind of deal. You're not in it to take a loss. I'm personally not in it to make any profit. I just like doing it. But that was his idea, to start with that volume. And Charles Prepelak from Canada, who bought the first volume, asked me that exact question. He goes, you're a silent film guy. He goes, why didn't you start with that, And I said, it was the publisher's choice, and I trust him. And his aspect, we both agreed on, we wanted tons of pictures. We wanted reviews from the exact period of time so people understood how the people viewed it, not how modern people view it. So we had a lot we wanted to put in it. Now, Gillette the Bread 5 was coming up, and I was scheduled to go that. And we wanted to have something out in time for that. So if we did a decade, we could get the format down and how we wanted to do it and get it out in time for that event. So people could have a nugget. That's just a nugget of what we're doing. I mean, it's like you found one thing of gold and what's coming up is going to be a gold rush for everybody. When they see what's coming out, they're not going to believe it. You're not going to believe the things you see and the people you see who were Sherlock Holmes in the future. I can't wait to get to that stuff. But, that's how that book is a little smaller than the rest are going to be. We wanted a hardcover. We wanted a collectible. We agreed I know the price is higher because we used the fine paper for the pictures, and we used the hardcover because we want it to be a collectible item. We don't care if it's mass market paperback and falls apart. We didn't want that. So we kept the price a little higher, and we tried to use something that would sell immediately.
In the ancient Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Wessex, it is St. Andrew's Day, when we celebrate the patron saint of Scotland with a day of feasts and reunions. But you won't be looking at family photographs, not when you can explore A Study in Celluloid, a producer's account of Jeremy Brett as Sherlock Holmes. It's the inside story of the most successful and faithful adaptation of Sherlock Holmes ever filmed by Michael Cox, the producer who decided to make the definitive series for a new generation. Back in print at last and available right now at wesexpress.com. How like a winter hath my absence been from thee, the pleasure of the fleeting year. What freezings have I felt, what dark days seen, what old December's bareness everywhere. Or if birds sing, 'tis with so dull a cheer that leaves look pale, dreading the winter's near. It's the perfect time to warm up with a new book from the Wessex Press. Choose yours today. Yeah, so for those of our listeners who are curious about what this looks like is you've just said, you have for every Sherlock Holmes appearance in talkies from 1929 to 1939 in this first volume, you have photographs, reviews, a list of the cast, where you've got that. You've got a summary of the plot, and you've got pictures and pictures and pictures of the lobby cards, the advertising, just about everything here, not just from the States, but also from Germany from 1937, Der Mann, der Sherlock Holmes war, Hans Albers as Sherlock Holmes. You've got, and I've never seen that. You've got Arthur Wantner, of course. You've got cartoons, The Herring Murder Case, with a character called Bimbo who wears a deerstalker. You've got Slick Sleuths from 1930, a Mutt and Jeff cartoon. You've got just about everything in here.
That was the colorization of that Mutt and Jeff. It was originally a silent film, a silent cartoon. So that'll be in the silent edition also of the first one. But that stuff's in there. But actually, what drives us crazy as completists is when we get that out and it's published, we found two more really rare things. And they'll start off the front of two, which will say, whoops, these should have been in one. And when we put it out as one major volume, when it's all done, they'll be back in section one, because I got another 29 or 39 film since then that are.
Well, you're missing a bet here. You could be selling the revised second edition. You know, that's even more of a collection.
I don't want people to find one. Nah, they'll be in the front of two. They're especially one of them. I was amazed when I saw it. I couldn't believe it. And it's going to be a big surprise when people see that. And it's an actual Sherlock Holmes. It's not – we have a lot of quasi-Sherlock Holmes, and you got to understand with the silent films, and of course when Doyle was alive and then his estate, they weren't going to let anything go without getting money, first of all. And also they claimed they wanted quality, so they wouldn't let any of this quasi stuff go out. So people often change names, but they appeared as Sherlock Holmes. And all the advertising always has the posters will have, what's her name? Burns and Allen, Gracie Allen, for example, in there.
The Gracie Allen murder case with sort of a Philo Vance thing.
Yeah, it's sort of a Philo Vance thing, but all the advertisement is her dressed as Sherlock Holmes. So that's a quasi-Holmes, but it's because of copyrights and it's because of money. And they wanted her to be Sherlock Holmes, so we include that stuff. The reader can say, oh, that's not Sherlock Holmes or this or that. It's the same thing going on with the modern Holmes and everything else. But we are completists. We're going to have everybody. If you're in a deerstalker or you're on a poster or you're walk through a set when it's being filmed, you're going to be in the book. So you're done. Same as the A to Z. I mean, look at our A to Z list. I add a dozen names a night for that from the stuff, for example, Jenny sends me or the other guys, Peter, or the ones I've said. And that just goes up by 10 a night. And as a matter of fact, Burr Walder, I know, is in there. He's it was a 1974 newspaper article, if I remember right, for the three Garadebs. I guess he was in that society. It was called, what's it called? Holmes Gets Homage, I think was the name of the article. Bert, do you remember like Andrew Peck or Bruce Kennedy?
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, Lenny.
Yeah, you're in the A to Z, and Scott's in there. I don't have him on his own entry yet because I've not found a nice picture of him dressed as Holmes. He's too dapper a dresser, I guess. But he's in one of your pictures because I put a modern one where he's standing next to you with his big smile, and you got your geostalker on.
How about that?
You're right there in 74 and again like in 2014 or something. You're in there twice, two pictures.
So our listeners know what we're talking about here. This is the A to Z of Sherlock Holmes performers, also housed on the No Place Like Holmes website. We'll have a link directly to that. And these are PDF files, alphabetically, as the title would infer, of anyone who's portrayed Sherlock Holmes in any kind of production. And Howard, you are absolutely right. I have played Sherlock Holmes. It was in a play that John Besh, Josh Schaefer, and I did before the Speckled Band, probably in the late 90s, I want to say. And I played Holmes. I need to. I've seen those photos somewhere. I don't know where they are, so I need to track that down.
Yes, you do. You need to be in the A to Z, or you're nobody now, Monty. You hear me?
Exactly.
That's funny.
So what's as you've been collecting these entries, both for the performers as well as the performances for the book, what's the biggest surprise been to you over the years?
Wow, that's a tough one. You know, if you ask me, everything gets redone. There's so many of the silent films are made into newer stuff, and the ideas are stolen all the time, and its ideas stolen. There's one that was never made that really ticks me off because it's the funniest plot. You'll see when the silent films is out. But sometimes people have said, what is a film you'd like to see best silence? And everybody's going to say, you know, Barrymore, Gillette. Yeah, I love that. But it's called Torpedo Pirate, 1918, with Walter Stevens. And it is, I was at 221 BCon, and I was doing a discussion on silent films. And they couldn't put anybody with me, so I had to talk an hour because nobody else knew the silent films. But I read the plot of that, and the place just cracked up. It's so funny, the action, how the professor, and they're trying to steal his secret torpedo that flies, and at the end of they bring in this vamp, this hot chick, and throwing the professor off, and they try to steal a thing, but Holmes comes in and saves it, and he ends up at the end, he flies it out of there so they don't get it, and he's flying it over the English Channel to France. And I don't know, that plot, I want to see that movie made. So big surprise is who's Sherlock Holmes? There's so many. How about Kirk Douglas? Would you know Kirk Douglas?
What?
Sherlock Holmes?
When did he play Sherlock Holmes?
Right. Japanese coffee commercial. Dressed as Holmes. It's entertaining. It's great.
You're kidding. Kirk Douglas. No. Kirk Douglas did a. Kirk Douglas did a spot for a Japanese coffee commercial dressed as Sherlock Holmes.
Well, sure, Bert. Who else would?
Yeah, of course. What a dummy I am.
Well, you got Charlton Heston, who played to me, he played a wooden Indian. They called it Sherlock Holmes. He was like a cigar store Indian to me, the way he acted as Sherlock Holmes. But there's a million surprises. I mean, you could take the A to Z, and it's behind a little because it's time to catch up. He's so involved making films and stuff. It's probably up through 4,300 right now, but I have over 4,500 in it. And there is you can't go through a letter without finding 10 or 15 major surprises, because I have Sasan, you know, if you remember Sasan, and he did a play just at one of your meetings, and I have a picture of him, you're in there. If you did cosplay at something and the picture's really cool, you're in there. I have one of my favorites is all the models. Some of these designers base their things on Sherlock Holmes, and the models dress with the Diastor or Sherlock, something involving Sherlock Holmes. And I have a load of models in there, and that's very enjoyable. There's a million surprises. And the book, the thing with the book in the future, which this book didn't have enough of, because those films, a lot of those films are well known, the Wantners and everything. And I try to get the lesser well knowns to put comments. The section called Odds and Ends, there was some in there, like, you know, about the films found in the Hitler's pillbox and stuff like that. But I try to put a lot of odds and ends trivia of this guy played Sherlock on stage and that, this guy played, and I tie in who's ever in a film into other places they played Sherlock, even if they're not Sherlock in that film. So there's a ton of trivia going to be in the 60s, 70s, and 80s especially. So that gets away from more this first book didn't have a lot of that, and that's something I really enjoy. So that would be a surprise.
That's fabulous. So Howard, if our listeners are suitably interested, where can they get a hold of Sherlock Holmes Cyclopædia Volume 1, and when do you expect Volume 2 to be available?
We're working on Volume 2. I expect it to be out hopefully before the first of the year. And it'll be twice as big as Volume 1 because it's going to go up through 1959. It's going to go right to the start of colorization with the Hammer film, Hammer Hound. So it'll go 1940 through 1959, basically. It can be got off the website of the publisher. Also, they could email me at Howard Ostrom, simple Howard Ostrom at gmail.com. And I have a number of copies of Volume 1, and it's $35. I postpaid. I'll send it to you, too. That's for people in the United States. Ray is in France, naturally the publisher, so he does Europe and Canada, but I do the United States people. When he gets orders on his website, he sends me the address, and I send them out from here.
Well, that's great. So the website is mycrofts.net. We'll have a link directly to the book in the show notes. To make it easy, just click right on that. It'll take you right to the book description and give you ordering instructions no matter where you are in the world.
That's right. And the thing, too, is I get asked this all the time, is why don't you put it on Amazon? And you have to understand, I have a French publisher, and their theory is we're not going to give our money to the president of Amazon so he can get richer. So that was his theory.
He's doing quite well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I know he is. So he's not interested in putting it on Amazon, but I get asked that all the time. It gets annoying.
His decision not to put it on Amazon is going to last just as long as it takes for you to see a photograph of Jeff Bezos wearing a deerstalker.
Well, now look into your A to Z. You want surprises? You're going to have a number of photos of Donald Trump in a deerstalker. You're going to have a number of photos of Barack Obama in a deerstalker. So yeah, there's plenty of surprises.
Well, that's great.
Like that.
There's a Sherlock Holmes for everyone, no matter your political persuasion.
That's right. The voice actors are in there. Actually, some stunt doubles are even in there because I had nice pictures of that. If they have a nice picture dressed as Holmes, they're going to make it in there.
Howard, is there anyone whom you would like to see play Sherlock Holmes who hasn't?
I was really hoping that Sacha Baron Cohen played it in this upcoming film because it was originally him as Holmes with, what's his name? Will Ferrell as Watson. Now that I would have liked to see. I'm not so sure if I want to see it with John C. Reilly with Ferrell as Holmes because he's a little bit too goofy as humor for me. But and I run a comedy club, so I have a good sense of humor. Have you seen the trailer for the Laurel and Hardy biopic that Reilly is in? Yeah, that looks good.
Yeah, I think he'll be great in that.
The trailer for Detective Pikachu interests me. I mean, I thought the trailer was very good for that. Whereas the trailer for that Sherlock Gnomes with Johnny Depp kept me from seeing it. Once I saw the trailer, I had no interest in seeing it.
Well, who knows? I mean, if you're watching Detective Pikachu, Kirk Douglas may pop up in a coffee ad. So.
Now, Michael, maybe we'll get Michael in that.
They can resurrect them. Well, actually, Kirk Douglas isn't dead yet. What am I saying? They could superimpose him.
No, he's over 100, I believe, and thank goodness he's still with us.
Yeah. Well, this is fantastic, Howard. You've got Volume 2 coming up next. I mean, what's your expected cadence for the entire collection here as you think about the decades that you're going to cover?
I think we'll go straight through until 2000 before the silents show up. I really like to get that silent out, but there's so many. You can't believe the number of silents that nobody's heard of that I got in. I mean, I found the first black silent, which is in none of the reference books. I found the first cartoon with Afro-American actors, voice actors. It was a part of the first silent. And I mean, all the reference books you got will list other films as that, and there was before that. I like what's going on now. I mean, I'm not an elementary fan. I really turned off by hoping American kids don't think that's the true Sherlock Holmes. But I actually love this Miss Sherlock Holmes with Yuko Taguchi. That's phenomenal, that show. Have you seen Miss Sherlock?
I certainly have seen it promoted. I haven't actually seen any episodes yet.
It's really a takeoff on the BBC Sherlock, and these two women are just absolutely wonderful in the parts. I was amazed by that. And actually, my favorite series out of all the things I have listed, it bombed in Russia, was the 2013 series with Petrenko and what's his name? So unfortunately died after they made this show. But it bombed badly in Russia. And there's a paper on Russia's site, so if you want to read all about how it bombed and everything, and why it bombed. But it's my favorite series. I mean, it just formed. It's eight episodes. It forms a novella, and it's just the best Watson you'll ever see, Andre Panin, and the best Lestrade you'll ever see. Out of all the thousands of films, I got 1,000 DVDs at least of Sherlock Holmes stuff. And those two are the best performances I've ever seen. Now, the Holmes was a bit quirky, but they're so beloved with their original guy, just like so many people are beloved with Brett. They're the same way with Levanov and Solimene, who were super. I mean, that's a super series, too. This film, these guys never had a chance because of politics, because the director was Ukraine and the Sherlock Holmes was Ukrainian. So it never got accepted but it's a wonderful series.
Yeah. Now, just in closing, Howard, if someone is new to the world of Sherlock Holmes, and there are all of these performers, all of these performances to choose from, and let's say people have access to anything as they do nowadays, what would your recommendation be as to where someone should start if they wanted to watch something about Sherlock Holmes?
I get asked this kind of question a lot, and actually the thing I send them to The Scarlet Claw with Basil Rathbone. I think if you don't like that one, you're not going to like Sherlock Holmes. To me, that is the best. It's not a Hound of the Baskervilles, but it's the best Gothic feeling that I wish some of the Hounds had. Some of these versions of the Hound had. You can't go wrong with the early Brett films too. If you want the Brett show, the early Jeremy Brett. But if they start with the later ones, they're not going to like it, I don't think. And I definitely tell them to stay away from Elementary, even though so many people love that show. Yeah. Well, you guys you can love it. Put it this way. I love all our children. I love every one of our children. Even Matt Fuhr, who I can't stand, but he's one of my children. Anybody who plays Sherlock Holmes is one of our children.
There you go.
So we love them, and they'll all be in the book. And I didn't write reviews because I don't want people judging my opinion. I just want them to see what the opinion. They can view it for themselves because they'll read a plot, they'll see pictures, and they can say, hey, I want to watch this, I don't want to watch that one. Because one of the films you mentioned earlier, the 37 one, the German one, that you guys haven't watched it with, what's his name, Albert? That's just such an entertaining film where two guys go on a train, two con men, and they're dressed as Holmes and Watson. Everybody thinks they're Holmes and Watson, and they're con men. And then they end up going at the end, they have to go in front of they get caught, and they have to go in front of a trial by jury. And surprise, Arthur Conan Doyle shows up and testifies for him. You know, it's just a funny, fun film.
What's the name of that film again?
The Man Who Was Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, of course.
That kind of thing I would recommend. I would try and find what the person's taste is really like. I mean, because you see everybody forces you with these lists of the top 10 favorite Sherlocks, best Sherlocks, blah, blah. It's all who entertains you the best, you know? I'm a ballet fan, so when I get those polls, a lot of times I put Sir Kenneth Macmillan, because just that picture of him doing a leap that no other Sherlock can do, and that's my reasoning. I said, show me another Sherlock who can do this, and then you could find a better one.
Well, so, Jeremy Brett sprung over the couch at one point, so, you know, there was that.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, the book by Howard Ostrom is Sherlock Holmes Cyclopædia Volume 1, 1929 to 1939. That's where you'll find that wonderful The Man Who Was Sherlock Holmes from 1937. The book is available, as we said, at mycrofts.net. We'll have a link directly to that in the show notes. You can get it there, and it will get shipped out to you post-haste. Howard Ostrom, thank you so much for sharing your very unique and extensive view of the world of Sherlock Holmes and media with us.
Oh, I enjoyed it, fellas. It was great talking to you guys. I've admired your shows for years, and I'm very honored to appear on it, to speak on it. So, and I'm fortunate it's an hour show, because I could talk to you guys for a week on this. It's such fun. Such fun talking about. So
great.
And Scott's got to remember to send me that picture so he can get it in the A to Z.
If I can find it, I'll send it along. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, you do
Thanks,
that.
Howard.
I keep a lookout. I'm on the hunt all the time. Facebook, Twitter. I have the Twitter Street Irregulars. I mean, they contribute a lot to me. I throw out questions there for people, and all the new entries to the A to Z, they pop up on the Twitter. So if you follow Howard Ostrom at Twitter, I mean, you're going to see anything unusual I find that I like goes onto the Twitter. Links to YouTube's, and you'll find some really interesting stuff there. My Twitter is 99 and 44% on Sherlock Holmes.
All right. So. Ivory Pure. Well, we'll put that in the show notes as well. Howard, thank you so much for telling your story.
I enjoyed it, man. Thank you.
Well, I have to tell you that even being aware that Sherlock Holmes is the most portrayed fictional character in film, I had no idea it was that extensive. Did you?
No, not at all. But, you know, one of the things that makes it so extensive is the very broad swath that Howard is accumulating and cataloging and researching and defining in his collection. And there's so much. I mean, just my own memory. I can remember after one of my earliest Baker Street Irregulars dinners at the lobby of the Algonquin Hotel, the then mayor of New York putting in an appearance wearing a deerstalker. And I'm sure somebody has a photograph of that, and all the people who've done Holmes and puppet shows and plays and science society meetings. It's a fire hose, I would imagine.
A fire eye hose, huh?
Yes, we need the eye nozzle to go on the end of the eye hose.
There you go. I can only imagine if Ed Koch showed up with a deerstalker on saying, how am I doing? How am I doing? How am I doing?
Yeah, somebody would have showed him Reichenbach, I think.
Oh, well. Well, that sound means that it is time to get on over to our quiz program. Of course, you know that every episode we do a little game show here called Canonical Couplets, and we challenge you to identify one of the 60 stories by these 2 lines of verse that we recite. And the last time around, it was this. The best 3/4 Richmond ever had. No laurels gained as husband or dad. Bert, do you know the answer to this one?
Yes, it's got to be the discarded 25%.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. I think you were shooting for a different version of the missing 3/4. And an admirable guess, but you know what? It's actually wrong.
What?
I know. You fell into the same trap that all but one of our correspondents did. We had a number of entries this time around that all guessed the missing three-quarter except for one. The winning answer was the Sussex vampire. Let me read that again so we can put it into context. The best three-quarter Richmond ever had. No laurels gained as husband or dad. Of course, you remember Big Bob Ferguson hurling Watson over from the Richmond game. And, of course, he was suffering through some familial problems there at home at Cheeseman's in Lamberley, and that's why Holmes was called in. So the answer was the Sussex vampire. And we don't need to spin the big prize wheel this time because there was only that one correct entry. And what do you know about that? It's Olivia Kirkendall. That's right, Olivia. Congratulations once again. This is a back-to-back win for you. You won in the very last episode, and now you've won this one. So I guess we have to, double up on prizes? I mean, have you got any bright ideas on this one, Bert?
Yes.
This is this is unprecedented. So I'm a little flummoxed here.
Well, we need to just take something wonderful from the IHO's treasure trove. If we can find Jack Benny's combination to the safe, or Uncle Scrooge's combination for that matter, and also because of the subject, we need to see if we can send Olivia a lovely gift certificate to Bob's Big Boy, which
is that canonical?
No, but it is historical.
Okay, but it is historical, and that's one of those weird things of Americana. It depends on where you are, if that's applicable. I'll tell you what, let's bundle the gifts together, and rather than sending them separately, we obviously send one package to Olivia. What we will have saved in postage, we will turn that into the Bob's Big Boy gift certificate. So,
oh, that's great. She can get extra fries then. That's good.
Yeah, or at least a cup of coffee. Well, that's fantastic. Now we have the next entry for Canonical Couplets. Are you ready? In this, alas, the great wrongdoer snatcher quietly failed to add a cubit to his stature. If you think you know the answer to this canonical couplet, write canonical couplet in the subject line of an email. Address it to comment@ihearofsherlock.com. Send it to us, and if you're correct, you may be one of the lucky winners next time around. Good luck.
Oh, excellent. I like that one.
Yeah. Well, we are rapidly approaching the end of the year. We actually have a couple of nice episodes coming up next that are tied in with science and Sherlock Holmes. That should be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that in December. And then, of course, as December rounds into January, that means that we'll be in New York attending the BSI weekend. January 9th through 13th, which if you do math, that's longer than just a weekend. They're in Midtown from Wednesday night until Sunday morning, early afternoon. There are all kinds of events going on for Sherlockians to partake in. Go on over to bsiweekend.com to check out all of the activities, and it'll have various links to send you to places to RSVP. They are pretty much all open to the public except for the BSI dinner. And if you're not in New York, you can certainly follow along with hashtag BSI Weekend on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So stay tuned. And if you do see the two of us, we will have a little something for us. All you have to do is come up to us and whisper in our ear, "I hose," and we will treat you to a little something.
Yes, we will give you the eye nozzle.
So you can look down that eye hose. Yes. The eye hose fire hose of information. Well, I don't know about you, Bert, but I am all hosed out. And so,
okay, hoser.
I was going to say, up to the Great White North. These are a couple of hosers, one being Scott Monty.
And I'm Bert Walder.
Take off.
The game's afoot.
You know, I'm afraid that in the pleasure of this conversation, I'm neglecting business of importance, which awaits me elsewhere.
Thank you for listening. Please be sure to join us again for the next episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast dedicated to Sherlock Holmes.
Goodbye, and good luck, and believe me to be, my dear fellow, very sincerely yours, Sherlock Holmes.